everyone, my name is Chiamaka and I'm on Atypical Podcast. We talked about what to do when faced with adversity. So make sure to tune into that episode. It's going to be very insightful and very fun. And subscribe.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Atypical Podcast, and it's atypical, not atypical, and I think eventually people will know what that means, but for now we're just running with it. And my name is Deji, I'm your host, and I have with me today.
My name is Chiamaka. I guess I'm a guest.
And she's a guest, and just talk to us just generally about yourself. Like how do you describe yourself?
Okay, I mean, I don't describe myself with just one word because I think I've always been like very dynamic. Mm-hmm. Like I do a bunch of different things. You know, one thing that I do is I'm a youth leader.
Mm-hmm. You're a tech babe.
I'm a tech babe. I was going to say that.
In the words of Bazariki,
yeah? Yeah. I'm a tech babe. I've studied healthcare informatics and I'm also learning DevOps engineering right now. And I'm also a psalmist. So I write spoken word. I actually wrote a book once.
Wow.
Funny enough, when I was like 10 years old.
Wow. Okay. What was the book about?
It was about like my life. But as a fictional character, like I embellished it in many ways. Because funny enough, what I did was I printed it out and I put it in like you know how you type and bind? Like
you are kidding me.
And I gave it to like everyone in my church and in my family to read, and that was it. But I don't know where that book is today. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I wish I could find it, like even the files or something and see what I wrote. But like growing up, I read a lot. Like I was always that child with a book in my head. So I just started wanting to write. At some point I told myself I was going to be a writer. Until like maybe my parents told me that like writing is not a career. That is more like
African parents.
It's more like a part-time. So they told me, okay, you can be a doctor and then you also be a writer on the side.
Yeah. Why do you think parents do that though? Why do you think our parents do that?
I think it comes from a good place. Like, you know, they know that, you know, in life you need money to survive, right? Mm-hmm. I think on one hand it comes from that place. But on the other hand, it comes from that like pride of a parent. Like, I know, like, especially in like my culture, especially like coming from like Eastern Nigeria, like having a child who's a doctor, they also put it as a title. Like they call themselves like it's like the mother of the doctor. Like you start.
I did not.
And they say it in Igbo. Right? Like you start wearing that title. People start calling you mother of a doctor, father of a doctor.
How do you say it?
Ne doctor.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a title that anyone would want to have.
I didn't even know that because I knew that we have titles for everything. People call themselves, I've heard of like people titling themselves surveyor.
Yeah.
Surveyor. Like, when did that become?
I found out that engineer is not a title, apparently.
Engineer is not
a title. But in Nigeria, it's definitely a title.
I need to repeat this for all the Nigerian, West African folks listening. Engineer is not a title. Remove it from your name. If you're an engineer, you're a mister. That's what you are. Own it. Love it.
Calling my dad Engineer Kennedy. Like,
that's not a title.
Engineer, pastor engineer. It's like Africans, they don't want to.
And the more titles, the better.
Yeah. Pastor, doctor, Miss. And the fact that Mrs. is also a title.
Yeah. Mrs. is a title. Mrs. is more, interestingly, Mrs. is more is more a recognized title than Mr. is.
It is because of like, especially in that like African culture
where marriage is an achievement.
Right. Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay, let's take a few steps back. I want to hear more about the book. So you wanted to write. You wrote this book, with yourself as like a fictional character. Like, how much reading did you do, and what kinds of books did you read that, would?
I read a lot of different things. So I don't know if you heard of Enid Blyton.
Yes, Enid Blyton. Yes,
I read all the series. I also read like Christian books. I read Left Behind. I read all 40 books of Left Behind.
What?
In primary school.
What?
Yeah. So when this came out,
that's the Tim LaHaye,
Tim LaHaye, yeah.
Tim LaHaye series. That's what.
Yeah.
And by the way,
kids one, yeah, the one that.
Oh, okay.
So there's one that follows like teenagers.
Really?
Yeah. So like teenagers. It also includes the adults as well, like the pilots. And,
Yeah.
But there's also these teenagers as well who like turn out to be like radical soul winners.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Like after everyone had left.
Yes. So it goes through the whole 7 years up until when Jesus comes back for the.
You know, I asked my brethren in my church. I mentioned Left Behind, and there were people that legit did not know, and I was so upset. I was upset. I'm like, how don't you know Left Behind? Because like every Christian millennial, I would say, or like of a certain like age range, I'm even surprised that because you're Gen Z, aren't you?
Yeah. Like borderline. Yeah.
No, you're not borderline. Everybody else says that borderline Gen Z is Gen Z. Just leave it alone. But I know what you mean. I know the age, bracket. But like almost everyone that I know knows like the Left Behind series. That's what helped even solidify like our Christianity at the time, because like that was literally the only novel that went through like, I didn't read all of it, but like that's the only novel that went into the detail of like the rapture and like what it means and all that.
And from a fictional
perspective, very, very interesting stuff. So yeah, back to African parents discussion. Interestingly, you mentioned that you wanted to write. At some point, I told my parents that I wanted to. Love my parents, by the way. Hi, mom. Hi, dad. I jokingly said, and I don't really, a side of me really wonders if it was a joke. Because till this day, I have not used the degree that I studied in school. Like, I went to school for electrical engineering, which wasn't the plan. I was supposed to be there for medicine. I'd always wanted to be a doctor growing up. The only thing I ever wanted to be. I applied to school for pre-med. I got into school. The school messed up my paperwork and they put me in electrical engineering. So I went for a weekend of like what we used to have, like freshman weekend. And it was so cool. The biology majors didn't have anything like that. So like engineering guys, they took us out like to some campsite. Like we had the time of our lives. I was like, maybe I'll still do like pre-med, but I'll do it as like an engineering pre-med type thing. Okay. Which makes no sense when you think about it now.
Like biomedical.
Yeah, like you technically can, but it's so much, it's incredible amount of work because you have to do all of the engineering classes, then all of the you basically be double majoring in biology and engineering, and that's like ridiculous. But at the time I thought, I'm smart enough, I can do it. Well, thankfully God saved me from that. I always say till this day, that's one of my biggest testimonies that I did not become a doctor. I'm grateful to God for all the doctors out there. But thank you, Lord
I can say the same thing for myself.
Thank you, Lord Jesus, that I did not find myself in that career path. Honestly. But while doing engineering, at some point I was just like, man, this really doesn't vibe with what I think I want to do. So I like jokingly like told my parents that I wanted to switch over to I think English or English literature. And I did not expect the amount of panic. I did not expect it. Like my mom was literally they were calling pastors that they should come and pray for me. Like this devil is deep.
It really is that deep.
It's really that deep. They were so scared. Like they were calling people like this demon that has taken over this guy's mind. You need to like da. I mean, it was the most extreme reaction. And to what you were saying earlier about how, yes, there's the title part of it, but there's also the part of it where they want you to like survive and to make money. I think fundamentally I don't think it's even just the title. I think the underlying factor for me is risk management. Because they do know that they are great writers. You're going to say something?
I was going to say the fact that they kind of use you as an investment, your child. For an African parent, your child is an investment.
Is an investment, and like nothing wrong with that. Like no shade, like there's nothing wrong with that. But like, no, I think that's actually that we need to stay on that for real. Like a child to the African parent is an investment, and there's nothing wrong with it, rightfully so. Yeah. Right. So a lot of their effort is risk management. I was saying that to say like that. They know that they are great writers, they are wealthy writers, but they're thinking,
what are the odds?
Yeah. Right? Yeah. If you even said you wanted to become a musician, they know they're great musicians that make like great money and have great influence, but what are the odds? So they always want to, and I hope parents are listening to this as well as, kids or parents that are making decisions about their lives. They always want to look for the path of least resistance. What is the path that's most likely to end in success for this person? And it's one of the things I always tell, people that I mentor, you need to be mindful when you're, talking with your parents and counseling, receiving help, getting, because you need their guidance in life. You really do, but when you're going through all of that, you need to be careful to make sure that you need to have it at the back of your mind that this, and it's even all over the world, this person's primary job really is to minimize the risks in my life. Yeah. And you have to also be mindful that in minimizing risk, right, you're also, reward is tied to risk.
Exactly.
So you are not going to become this phenomenally great person or this, outlier, this, history shaking person following those rules. You'll be good. You'll feed your family. You do all of that stuff. But if you want more, just be mindful. What does you think about decisions that parents make?
Yeah. So even speaking on the part of the African child being an investment, for their parent, it's almost like a retirement plan.
It is a retirement plan.
It is. And it's funny because I'm thinking about the fact that, we're the ones, it's kind of in our culture to actually take care of our parents.
Yeah.
Even until
and that's a blessing. That's a blessing that I feel Americans have been, we live in America, but this nation to a great deal, when you read the scriptures, it's a blessing that many American families have been robbed of. And it's also, based on the fact that, parents also take responsibility for their kids up until a point, right? At the age of 18 in the US, get out of my house type of thing. Not in any mean way like that, but it's part of the culture, you need to go and do your own thing. Meanwhile, back home, people can stay with their parents still there in their mid-20s, late 20s. College,
yeah, debt-free and everything.
Exactly. It's very communal. So I think it comes with the package of being an individualistic society. Something I wanted to I'll talk to you about, because you went to boarding school in Nigeria and in the US.
Yes.
What's the difference, boarding school in Nigeria? Because every time I say I went to boarding school in Nigeria,
it's like prison in Nigeria.
Yeah, Americans think that I'm talking they imagine
S1E9 101.
Yeah. You yeah, I did watch that show. You fancy. You went to boarding school, your parents must have a ton of money.
But in Nigeria, it's a rite of passage. It's once you turn 9 or 11, you're being shipped off. And it's funny because you can be going to boarding school right next door, which is what is the point? I lived in this, when I went to boarding school in Nigeria, I lived in the same city as my boarding school was 15 minutes from my house. So it's
mine wasn't that close.
Why am I here?
Yep.
But
and I think I definitely want us to talk about that from a parenting perspective, because it's something that's been on my mind recently, right? Boarding schools and the relevance of them, and if I would do that, with my kids. But just generally speaking, what's the difference between that experience from in Nigeria, you said, prison? What's the US version like?
The US version was completely different. The freedom, you have a lot more freedom. Your parents can literally come anytime, and as long as they're your parent, they can take you out to lunch. Your parent can literally come and take you out to lunch.
Wow.
We didn't have those uniforms that people would wear.
Really? I imagine when I imagine boarding school in America, I imagine uniform. But maybe maybe I'm thinking about
my
UK.
school, what we had was formal dress. So we had formal dress code. So you had to wear slacks, you couldn't wear jeans to class or things like that, shorts, unless they were whatever those shorts are called. But you had to wear we had some days where you have to wear a blazer, but it's your own clothes. It wasn't an actual uniform.
I see.
Yeah, and then we live. It's similar in the sense that you live in dorms but I think what I remember about boarding school in Nigeria is this huge room with 5 or 6 other girls. We won't have things like that. Like here, it's more like a college dorm.
You even had a better experience in the Nigerian one. Like my boarding school experience is like where like you're in this room with like it has to be at least 20 bunk beds.
Really?
Maybe that's a lot.
Yeah, that's
no.
wild.
It has to be at least 20 bunk beds, and each bunk bed has like 2 people on it.
Oh, wait, like on?
No, like one on the bottom and one at the top. That's a lot of people in the same space.
So that's like, wow, that's a lot.
It was a lot of people, and I went to an all boys school as well. So like it felt in every way like a prison, in every way like prison. I mean, the food in some degrees was like, you know, I liked some of the food. You know, maybe I was just rugged, but I liked some of the food. But like other than that, like it wasn't anything to me. And whenever I imagine like American boarding school, I imagine like Harry Potter, like Gryffindor.
Yeah, like it's very similar to like a college dorm in the sense like maybe you have two roommates, maybe a triple, or you can even have a single. You have a single.
That's the life.
Literally, yeah. Like, and you know the dining hall is like a college dining hall with like buffet style. And then we had sports teams. You know, so you would, you know, playing sports was not optional. So you had to either do sports or you had to do like theater. You know? So
what did you do? Theater?
I did theater.
How did I know? How did I figure that?
I actually used to do musicals. Which is
really?
Yeah, I did musical. I did Beauty and the Beast. I did Fiddler on the Roof.
Wow, all in the same school.
Yeah.
Was there like was it a shock for you? Like you hadn't lived in America before you came to this American boarding school, had you?
I hadn't.
Okay, so
your culture shock was real. Actually.
Okay, let's talk about that, right? Like when you leaving from like Nigeria and your first experience of America is in boarding school. I think like it's like a double
whammy. Yeah,
it's a double whammy because there's a shock of like the American space, but then there's a shock within America of because not every American even knows what that boarding school in America life is like, right? What was that like for you?
I think for me,
and how old were you?
So I actually came from my last couple years of high school. So I was like 14, 15. Yeah. And I think at that time, what was really different for me was just the culture of the kids. Like, I feel like growing up being in a Nigerian boarding school, there was this freedom that we had with each other. Like, whereas here, I felt like I just didn't understand, understand the jokes people would make. Like, I felt like I was trying to fit into something. Whereas, you could come to boarding school and you just feel like you just blend in, with
everybody else
over there.
Oh, wow.
So it was very interesting for me. Especially just trying to relate with the people at first. And then also I found in my classes as well, I don't know, there's something about I don't know if this is the way American kids grow up. I feel like, I would be in literature class and we would be analyzing a book. And it's people just have knowledge of so many different things. And maybe because I was coming from a more sheltered background, being in Nigerian boarding school, you're literally, you don't have access to internet or the phone or things like that, right? So it's people just seem to know all these,
know different things.
Yeah, there's just this way, I think they're just in American education, right? You're kind of pushed to think outside the box.
That's the next thing I was gonna say actually, because this is a really important point in the sense that one of the most horrible things, and even Pastor Chris says this all the time, the way that people are educated in Africa is, especially particularly in Nigeria, it's you're being programmed to regurgitate. You're not really being taught to think. And that accounts largely for the fact that, Pascal says that it's a nation orchestrated to administrate rather than being orchestrated to produce. Because if you're going to be orchestrated or designed to produce, you will have to have some kind of creative liberty in your minds, which we were not allowed. Like imagine we're literally like poured information and told to pour it back.
Pour it back, yeah, on an exam.
Wow.
So it was.
So they would have like knowledge of like other things, and then
like because we would do like. Because one thing like about those boarding schools, like they pride themselves on having like small classes, so you have discussion style. So everything was discussion style. And I felt like I came to America, and being in Nigeria, I was very outgoing. And I came to America, and all of a sudden, like I would be like, they would always write in my report card, she has a lot of great things to say, but she doesn't say them. Because I think I kind of like, I started retreating because I started like looking at these people like, they seem to know more than me. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So I just kind of changed in that way. Like I became very like reserved and quiet, which was not how I was before.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Did you also, because one of the things that happens with like kids that move from from Nigeria to the US is, they always get like the African kid teasing. Did that happen in boarding school? Because I feel like boarding school would be a different environment.
Yeah, it was different. But I think what it was is more so those nuances where it's like, oh, you look very exotic.
Oh, okay.
They say those like things where it's like it's not blatant.
Yeah.
But there's a word for it.
Yeah.
And also, asking me questions of like ridiculous things like,
ridiculous. But what if they're just curious though? Maybe they're just like genuinely curious.
I guess so.
Like questions about like your hair or like
questions about my hair, questions about how like, how did I find this school? Like from Africa. Like I'm like, I found it on the internet. Like it's
and then like wow, like
we have internet.
You have
like,
the internet?
Like how are you able to adapt? Like it was just I think it's, and also the thing is I was like the only black kid in my, like one out of 2 black kids in my class. So the school had like maybe 15 black kids in the whole school.
Out of how many kids total?
Like 450-ish.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was another thing as well. And these kids come from a very privileged background. Like one of my roommates was a melon, like Carnegie Mellon.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's those types of people.
When he said it melon, I was like, melon. And then the moment, just before he said Carnegie Mellon, like it clicked.
Yeah. So they literally have no idea. Like they're so far removed from African culture. So like you come, especially, and the thing is, the black kids who are there, like they happen to be like,
also like
first gen, like more like,
really?
or they're not direct immigrants.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, maybe they were like a couple, like
I thought you were saying first generation, like I don't know why my mind went to first generation, like high school graduate. I was like that.
Oh no.
Yeah,
no.
Okay, so first generation, like
yeah. So they also don't really relate that much to with like the motherland. They're so they're also very much Americanized. So then the few of us who actually came from Africa were like, it's like, wow, who is this exotic person?
Yeah.
And it's not just the students, it was the teachers too. Like I would get those comments about, wow, you're so exotic, from teachers as well.
What am I? What do you mean exotic? Like
that's the thing. Like what does that?
What does that even mean? That's weird. That has to be like weird. But it was also a very like expensive school to like.
Yes.
That's interesting stuff. So and your parents, was there any particular reason why your parents wanted you to go there or just?
Oh, I think the school I was at in Nigeria, actually, there was a scandal. And then my parents were like, we're sending you out of the country. Because my sister was coming over here to college at the same time.
Okay.
So they sent all of us. So me and my 2 little sisters came here as well. And then because my parents didn't really want to like, have us stay in a family member's house and have to like go to day school. So they just sent us to boarding school because that would be like the way that we could, they couldn't.
To show where you're at.
Yeah, exactly.
And then during the holidays, you go back home?
I actually went home like summer, Easter, and Christmas. And when my mom was coming, like on the short holidays, my mom would always come and she would pick us up from school. So that, my mom was here all the time.
Okay.
she was here pretty often, actually. Yeah.
Now comes the very interesting question, right? Around boarding schools and outsourcing parenting. What do you think?
I think for me personally,
would you, let's start this way. Like, would you send your kids to boarding school?
I wouldn't.
In Nigeria or America, having experienced both?
If any, maybe America, just because there's more access to the children there. Like I could talk to my parents on the phone every day. Like I could FaceTime my parents. Like they could come see me. You know, whereas in Nigeria, it's like you don't have a phone. You can't even talk to your parents until like the day where they have the phone call for like 5 minutes. They had calling days at my school. So I think Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they have a certain time where your parents could call. So I think because of that, because for me, it's more so like you're literally giving your child to be raised by someone else who may not have the same values as you. Yeah. And a lot of things happen in those boarding schools that you may never that really shape a child's development.
Lot of things.
A lot of crazy things happen. So that's why I don't really understand it, because you're literally, like, especially in Nigeria, right? You're literally gone from September until December. You don't come home. Your parents come visit you once, like on visiting day.
Yeah. And then maybe you go on midterms. If you even.
And then for the whole time you're there, and you're literally just there with, people from all types of backgrounds, teachers from all,
And it's such formative years too that
exactly.
I think parents really need to be involved. I remember I went from, and I've shared this on like a different podcast episode, I went from, being excited to go to boarding school to first day in boarding school realizing I got myself in boarding school. I asked for it. My parents did not want me to go. I begged. Then I got in day one. I realized this is the worst decision I've ever made in the 9 years of my life so far. I tried to like walk it back. My parents were not having it, right? So I went from that period where I would literally, I wanted nothing more than to leave boarding school. Like those years, like I stayed there. I wanted nothing more than to leave. In fact, like I used to have like, what do you call that thing? Man, I don't know how you describe it. When kids will get picked up after school. There's a psychological term that people use for it these days now, where there's like a name for everything. But like kids will get picked up from school, and my parents always came late. And I would literally like be I know they're coming, but somehow it did something weird to me. Like I would be on the like railing, just watching every car pass, because my school was also in the city. It wasn't like in some far place, it was in the city. And it was like driving distance from my dad's office.
Wow.
Like literally my dad was walking up the street. So every Mercedes, every white Mercedes that passed of the same, year and make as my dad's, I'm like, are they going to turn in here? Nope.
Wow.
So like, I went from that point of like wanting nothing more than to be out of that space to, by the time it was getting closer to the end of like my days in boarding school, I didn't want to be at home. Like holidays would come and I would just like pass on going home. Like literally, I would be one of the only kids that were in school were kids, because my school was also very diverse, which King's College gave us that blessing. We had like as diverse as far as like Nigeria. Like we had kids from the north, from the east, from like people like traveled like to be there. So some of them couldn't go back home. So those were the only people that were on campus during the breaks, and maybe like 15 kids, 20, I don't know. But like I would be one of them, even though my house was like a short drive away. And over time, now I'm saying this because like you mentioned something about how like, things like your kids are being shaped in real time. From there, right after graduating, I didn't spend up to like a year at home before I came to America. So I was like basically independent for so long.
That's another one.
And to this day, something that I'm personally, fighting for and improving on daily, which is like my relationship with my parents and with my family members, because I just didn't have that.
Yeah, that happened with my sister too, because she went off to boarding school in Nigeria before us, and it's like the rest of us are growing up playing together, and like she would come home and it's like we don't know you,
Yeah.
So that's actually an important thing too, because coming here actually made me coming to boarding school here actually made my family much closer. Somehow, like, because my mom would always come
here,
and pick us up. She would drive from each person's school. We started, like, keeping in touch because we could. Like, we could FaceTime. We could actually call each other on the phone.
Wait. You could FaceTime when you were in school?
Yeah, except just during prep.
So no. What I mean is the iPhone existed when you were in school?
Oh. No.
You know what you were saying earlier that you guys had call days in your school back in Nigeria and you had like, Tuesdays, what is it you call it?
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
There were no cell phones when I got to school.
Oh,
there were no cell phones.
really?
But we did have a payphone on campus though that you could use anytime. We just had to have like a credit. There was a card that had like credit on it. You put it in, like the
Oh
and then
gosh. I've never seen one of those.
It was one of those Nitel payphones, and like, I don't know if this thing exists anymore. But like your ability to reach your parents depended on it, and plus your parents also didn't have cell phones. So when you're calling, you better hope that your dad is at the desk at his office, or someone is at home to pick up the call. Like, interesting times. She's looking at me like, what?
That even makes it worse. Because I imagine now, maybe they have more communication.
Maybe they do.
But yeah, just being here, I think it brought my family closer, made us more like close knit, which is one thing that I value a lot. Like, because I imagine the way that I was going those first 2 years in Nigeria, like, things would happen, your parents wouldn't know, like. It opens the door to a lot of things.
It really does. There were people that like, there was a kid that unfortunately passed when I was in school from a sickness. And I don't think it took a while for his parents to even know.
Wow.
Yeah, just that he was sick. I don't even know if they found out while he was sick that he was. So like, imagine like the craziness of that. Like, you're going about living your life, your child isn't feeling well, and you don't know because there isn't quite a way to reach you. But of course, I think that shouldn't be a problem these days anymore. Yeah. But back to the other thing that we talked about before this. So you went from like being in this really good boarding school, and then at some point you had mentioned that in that hooked story that. The circumstances with your family's finances changed drastically. What was that like?
I think at first it was just the shock because, it's like you can tell that something has changed. But one thing about my parents, they tried to shelter us from it. They tried for like a year or so until it just became blatant because we couldn't go to school anymore. And it happened to be when I was starting college.
Wow.
So,
thankfully you finished.
I had finished boarding school. Yeah. So then when I was about to start college, and it's funny because like when my counselors were asking me, oh, do you need financial aid? I'm like, nah, no need, I'm good. So I didn't bother with any of like looking for schools that would actually give me any aid. I went to the school that does not give international students any aid at all.
Wow. So at what point did you have a conversation with your parents and like, Mom, are we broke now? Like, at what point?
Because my parents, they tried
so
everything.
Hard,
they tried so hard. So it was literally until like it was getting to the point like school starting next week. Like, what's going on? Am I going to school? I'm still in Nigeria.
Really?
Literally, school was because I would always come home for the summer holiday.
Yeah.
So, and I know that summer I kept hearing conversations. Like my dad would always be on the phone talking about this and that, and it was always like whispers. So I'm like, what's happening? And then we're getting to August. We're getting to August 25th. I'm still in Nigeria. Wow. And then my dad finally, he kind of told me that something had happened. He had gone into a very terrible financial situation. And there was actually like law enforcement involved and a lot of stuff happening. So but he told me that he's working it out. And I think what he did that first time, he had this Lexus SUV. He sold it.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's how I started school at Boston University.
Wow. Yeah. Parents really be doing the most amazing things though. Yeah. And, a lot of respect to parents that make those sacrifices for their kids. And, I always tell people like, you have to remember that your parents don't have to. A lot of young people don't realize that those sacrifices don't have to be made. it's a choice that they made. There are a lot of other options that they had. And, a lot of respect to parents. We appreciate what you do. Yeah, so he sold the SUV to have you in school, okay?
Yeah, and it took me back to school and I started, but, things just weren't right, because there was even a time that my dad was like, he was gone off the radar for a while. And I asked my mom, like, oh, where's, like, I'm trying to reach my dad. He's unreachable. And my mom is like, oh, he's on a sabbatical. I'm like, since when does he go on sabbaticals? But it turned out my dad had been arrested.
Oh, wow.
For a while. So I think that was like when it started to really like hit me that things are really bad. Because like, they were still trying. Like they sent us, after my dad sold his car, they sent us all back to school. We started off, they made it work. But it was actually a lot worse than we realized, And it went on for, that was 2014. It went on for like 8 years where after my dad had, lost everything that he had, he didn't make any income for those years, just from one failed thing to another.
Wow.
And for me, like,
What was like the lowest point for you at that time, like personally, like not family wise? Like what was like for you the lowest point?
The lowest point was when at first I was able to go to school, and then I made it from freshman year, sophomore year, and then there was nothing else to sell. My dad had sold everything that he could sell. There was nothing else to sell at that point. Because, we're all going to expensive schools.
Yeah.
So at that point, there was nothing else to sell. So I went back to Nigeria and, I watched my classmates finish their school and graduate. And, my parents also were trying to like shield us. They didn't want everyone to know what was going on. So for like 2 years, I was in Nigeria and I didn't leave my father's house. Like I didn't walk out of the gate.
Wow.
So I was literally in that house. I would see like, my friends have graduated, things are happening, and I would be there day in, day out.
Wow.
Like, not sure of what I'm doing. So that was the lowest point for me. It's just, I remember a time just feeling like am I going crazy? Like, Lord, like at that point I was like, I think it was after, I had been there for 1 year. And every time my parents had so much faith. That's the most inspiring part, because they would say every semester, okay, you guys are going back this semester. You're going back. We're going to make it work. And then the start date would come and we wouldn't go. I just remember one time, like just sitting in my room after like maybe 2 weeks of the semester had passed. And I'm just like, Lord, I'm just not doing it. I just don't want to live this life anymore. Because it was also so tough being at home too, because there was no money at home. Like we would be there's no electricity. So the generator would be off. We would be in the dark. We would be in the dark, just looking at each other. And yeah, it was
wow.
Just looking at each other and just feeling like my life was going to waste. That was it for me. And I think one day I was just like, Lord, I just, I don't want to go on anymore because I don't know what's next.
And like mentally, like even like in terms of like mental health, that's a toll. Like that
I didn't see anyone apart from the people who lived in that house with me for like 2 years, and.
So you guys didn't even like venture out to church or?
We didn't go to church. My parents didn't let us go. We had to watch church online.
Wow.
Yeah. They just didn't want us, because there was a lot of talk happening, and they didn't, people would ask questions. They just didn't want people to know that we were there.
Yeah.
So we were literally hidden from the world for 2 years.
Whew.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
But then, now you've graduated school and everything, like, right?
I have.
Yeah.
And, I think getting through that time, really, it was just, I think I hung on a lot to my parents' faith. Because, I think just them just trying to be strong for us. So they would keep pushing. And I think after I reached that point where it was like, Lord, I'm not going forward anymore. I remember just laying on my bed, like on the floor in the dark, and just, and I had to realize that it's either I give up now or I keep going. Like there's no other option. Like, and I think that was a moment where I decided to like rededicate my life to Christ.
Wow.
And take my walk with God seriously. So in the whole year of 2017,
wow,
I was home. And that year I did the Bible in a year. Like,
wow.
I went for the word of God.
Wow.
Because I wanted to know God for myself. I wanted to like...
Because there's only you can only hang on to your parents' faith for so long.
Exactly. And I know my dad was going through his stuff, but I would hear him listening to Kenneth Hagin in his room. He literally would just lock himself. I think he said he didn't like to come out and see us because when he come out and he sees us, it affected his mental health. So he would just lock himself up in his room and he'd be listening to Kenneth Hagin.
Wow.
Over and over his faith messages. So that, I think I went to my dad's room and I took one of his books and one of Kenneth Hagin's books on faith, and I read it, and then that's where it sparked my interest. So I decided I wanted to like build my own faith for myself. So that whole year of 2017, I finished the whole Bible that year. I would listen to messages online, and I didn't go to church. I didn't have the opportunity to go to church, but I was just feeding myself with the word of God, like getting myself stronger, until I could, finally leave the house and go back to school. So that year was very, very formative for me.
This is very interesting because in a prior episode where I talked about how I think it was TGK that said that kings are raised in the desert. And we talked about the fact that a lot of people of influence or value of importance in the world have to go through immense difficulty, and how that kind of builds and strengthens character in a way that may not be able to happen otherwise. Because now you look back at it, and as unpleasant as that period was, one thing it did, I always say this, something I was like say, one good thing did come out of it. Like whenever things look bad, I always, you just hear me after, well, one good thing did come out of it. So like in this instance, one good thing did come out of it, which is the fact that you were able to build up your own faith for yourself, which you have now even used beyond, you're now using beyond that crisis period, as it were.
Exactly. So I built my faith up, I got stronger in the word, and by 2018, I had a miracle because someone gave us $200,000.
Wow.
And that's how I came back to America.
Wow.
Yeah. Someone just for free.
Wow.
Free $200,000.
No. I think that's important to also understand in terms of faith working, because Kenneth Hagin is known for teaching the message of faith. Yes. And that's what your dad was listening to. So apart from your own faith, even at work, your dad's faith, he was locking himself up and ingesting, feeding himself with God's word for a period. This is a good point to what they call that thing? Break the third, what's the term where you talk to the audience at home? This is a good point to talk to anyone that's listening. If you're going through any difficulty, one of the things that I often say is that time has a weird way of playing tricks on you. Yeah. Time has a weird way of playing tricks in your mind. What you're going through that's temporary, often in the moment feels like it's going to be forever.
Right.
Instead of giving your attention to that thing, give your attention to what it is that you can invest in yourself in that period that will help you for the future. I remember something, and of course I faced different kinds of adversity in my life, but there's one that I always remember. That's the time when I'd gotten this really, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I haven't talked about this specific part. I'd gotten this really lucrative summer internship that, the year before it, I paid me $15,000, maybe $15,000 to $17,000 in 3 months or something like that, dollars, was with an oil company, and that offered me to come back. I accepted the offer. I was going to get paid more, and they were going to add $5,000 bonus just because, I was coming back and, towards school or whatever, which was going to be additional money for me. And then all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I hear the Spirit of God speak to me in an audible voice. It was after a church program. The Lord speaks to me, and He talks to me about many different things. But one of the first things that He says is, turn down that job offer. Mm-hmm. Now, I love God. I've always loved the Lord. So for me, it was whatever you ask me to do, I'm going to do. no questions asked. I was concerned about the time though. I was concerned at the time about, reneging on an offer. That's the only thing I was concerned about. I give him my word, I'm going to come. I signed the book. Now I have to go back and like walk it back, which was a thing at that time. I hear it's no longer a thing. Reneging is no longer a thing. So at the time, that was the only concern that I had. But I canceled the job offer. But watch this. For that period of time, I thought like if God told me to reject a job offer, that means that like that, I would get another one. Dearly beloved. 1 month
so
passed.
You didn't have a job.
I did not. Like the entire summer.
Wow.
May is like when everyone's like getting ready for their internship to start in June. So I'm like, okay, I'll still find something, which already is like tough to find, but I had faith. June, internships have started and I'm still applying aggressively. July, August, school resumes in like end of August, beginning of September. That was the toughest several weeks of my life because it made me question everything. Did I truly hear from God?
And I'm sure from the voices too, like people calling you crazy, like
why would you make that kind of a decision? Yeah. And everywhere I applied, I didn't hear back. But it really did something phenomenal for me because two things. One of them, there was a Rhapsody Realities article from that year. That year was 2009, I believe. There was a Rhapsody Realities article that was titled Joy Unspeakable and Full of Glory. I read that article so many times. I ended up printing it out and pasting it on my wall to see every day.
Wow.
To see every day. And I will read it again and make the confessions again. Read it again and make the confessions again. Read it again. Then I got super involved in praying with the man of God. It was around that time the pastor also started the Pastor Chris Life prayer program. So I would spend time praying. I would spend time, a lot of spiritual growth that happened with me happened in that period. So you always have to be mindful that what you think is a minor sometimes could be an opportunity for a kind of reset that you need.
Exactly. Because I think what I learned in that year, it was crucial for me because I still had many years of that challenge ahead of me. And even that, I think it was almost like the Lord just gave me the opportunity to restart.
Wow.
And choose a different path.
Wow.
Because the path I was going on, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Wow.
It's almost like I feel like, was I that valuable to the Lord that he had to pause my life?
Wow.
So that I could come back to that place where, because I can imagine who I would be today.
No, that's deep. Someone's looking at it thinking, why is this happening to me? And then you're able to look back and say, was I so valuable to God that he would shake everything to get me to have a reset point?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's how I found myself, in the ministry of Pastor Chris as well. Because after someone gave us that money, after studying the Word of God for 1 year, I was itching to go to church. I knew that no one had to tell me to go to church and find a place to serve. It was on my heart. Even from Nigeria, I started searching for churches in Boston. And I went to a place, and then that's how my friend, Pastor Ruki, she invited me to Thai
Rhapsody
conference.
Club.
Rhapsody Club
first, right?
Yes. And then from Rhapsody Club, I was able to go to Thai conference in 2019. And it's I found what I was looking for.
Well, you had a very unique experience at Thai conference. I think something, I don't know if, was it a prophecy or something? Because I think...
Yeah, it's the Lord I had a vision of myself, on campuses. And it's funny because I had seen that. I remember one day I was in Nigeria, and it was one of those, I think it was after my class had graduated in 2018. Mm-hmm. And then, I was feeling bad. And then, maybe I kind of strengthened myself in the Lord. And I had a vision. I saw myself standing in front of a stadium of young people preaching the gospel.
Wow.
And it's I came for Thai conference and I saw that again.
Wow.
So it was is this the answer?
Wow. Wow.
So something that I saw in a time where I couldn't have, there was no correlation.
There was no correlation. You couldn't have even made that up.
Yeah. Like I never would have even known from Nigeria that when I was in that place in Nigeria that I would ever like become, someone who preaches the gospel. Like I was
That's
not
amazing.
something that was in my path at that
And now
point.
you're preaching the gospel on campuses.
Exactly.
Not even one campus now, like on different campuses. Wow. And it's still a stepping stone to, because that vision is going to come to pass. Whatever the Lord shows us, He has a plan, to bring it to pass. As long as we play our role in it, of course, in prayer and all that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think that what I love about this story is how it really, models, because people go through stuff and that's just the way, life is. But it models for you what, in your case, you stumbled on what you should have done, right? It just so happened that you found yourself saying, you know what? I'm either going to give up now. I'm going to forge ahead. And if I'm going to forge ahead, I'm going to forge ahead on the back of my own faith. Therefore, I need to build my own faith, right? So that was the case for you. But for someone that's, listening to this, and that's what I said was the purpose of this podcast, really, that people can take advantage of other people's learnings. So if someone that's going through something, instead of, woe is me, it's time to turn to the Lord. It's time to dig your heels in deep. It's time to, learn more scriptures than ever before. It's time, and those pause times are so important. When I left from school as well, I didn't, get an admission for about a year. They call it gap year now. It wasn't an intentional thing, so I can't even call it a gap year. Let's even be fair. But in that period, I learned so much of God's word that foundation is still keeping me till now. And people don't realize how important it is. So you may be in a place where it seems like everything has paused, and it hasn't paused just, wow, this is a whole message. I ain't even plan to preach, but it hasn't paused because there's necessarily, of course, there could be something going wrong, but it could have paused as an opportunity for you to revisit the foundations. If you're going to do a renovation on a building, or you want to add a level to it or do stuff to it, you're going to have to empty it out, right? If there's a business that was operating there before, that business will have to be on pause. Why? Because something is under construction. Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Wow. Any final words, as it were, to wrap up?
What I say?
I mean, we talked about a bunch of things. We talked about school. We talked about, parenting, boarding school experiences, and just like, going through adversity in life,
Yeah, I think one thing I've noticed, that's consistent in everything is just the intentionality of the Lord in my life. Because it's clear how everything has kind of been connected to bring me to a certain place.
Wow.
And, back then, I couldn't have seen how long it was going to take, like, especially, finishing school, like, 8 years after, not 8 years, but
yeah,
very long after I was going to initially.
Yeah.
But I think it just shows that everybody's path is different in a way, but the Lord also has a unique path for every single person. And for you to really actualize that path, you have a role to play. Because, things happen for my family. And, one thing that I've noticed is that people who go through these things that we went through, they often never come out of it.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, my family once had money.
Yeah.
That's your story.
Yeah.
But because of that foundation that we all built, like, my dad is a minister. Like, he's not a pastor, but he's a minister now.
Yeah.
As well. Because of, because of that foundation that we all built, we were able, it took a long time. It took years. Like, things weren't good until like last year. So like 8 years.
Wow.
But it took a long time. But because of that foundation that we built,
yeah,
we were able to turn things around and also go beyond that, where it's like now we're living beyond ourselves.
Yeah.
So like, everyone's focus has changed.
Wow.
Like my dad goes for evangelism every Saturday.
Wow.
Like everyone's focus has changed. And, it's interesting how how it works out like that, but it's something that the Lord had planned from the beginning. And you have a role to play in actualizing that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. This has been a very, I think for me, a very, very insightful discussion. I think that anyone that listens to it, this is one of those episodes where, your takeaways are very clear. They're very clear. And of course, it's a great opportunity to also reflect, on, the greatness of our parents, as it were, in our lives. But, more than all of that, like, it's a great opportunity to reflect on the things that you thought were adversity, that were against you, that could have been for you. One of the things that same period, that I talked about earlier, before that and into that period, I got a chance to meditate on Romans 8:28, because I learned from Pastor Chris how to meditate on scripture, which is all things work together for good. And till this day, that was 2009, till this day, that scripture has so merged with my spirit that I never ever find myself in this difficult situation without thinking to myself, it's working to my advantage. Like, it's formed my mind. And imagine if, and I've been in some pretty interesting scenarios where people literally said to me, you're out of your mind for taking this step. You're going to get in trouble. This is not going to work out the way that you plan. And I'm going into it, of course, the Lord guiding me, right? And I find that as I declare those words, it's only working to my advantage. It becomes so. And it's not something that I'm forcing, because I had the time. I was able to give the time to that meditation. So, and it's not to say that, the only opportunity that you ever have to meditate on scriptures and to internalize them is, in the case of adversity. No, we're just saying, if you're in a difficult place, take advantage of it as an opportunity. If you're not in a difficult place, give time to meditating on God's word. Yeah. Wow, great episode of Atypical. Remember, it's atypicalpodcast.show on all social media platforms. And you can email us at hello@atypicalpodcast.show. You can also visit our website, atypicalpodcast.show, and that's .show and not .com. How can they reach you? Or are you selling anything? Because I always get like a few seconds.
Follow me on Instagram at Chiamaka. Check out my spoken words, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on King's Chat.
On King's Chat, Chiamaka as well.
Yeah. And just, share your feedback with us. Remember to share. And post your comments as well. Let's know what you learned and what more you would like to hear. God bless you.